Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
Felt like a leper. That should be going around with a bell, ringing, unclean, unclean. Because in the early times, people who had psoriasis were lumped in with lepers because they didn't know the difference.
Hello, and welcome to Getting Clear on Psoriasis. I'm your host, David Brandt, and I've been living with psoriasis for more than 30 years. In this podcast series, we bring you stories about different people's experiences with psoriasis and hear from medical professionals who treat the condition every day. Our goal is to offer tools and resources to help you manage your psoriasis, seek out the best treatment options, and live a more full and productive life. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be substituted for medical advice. Please consult your own medical professional with any questions regarding a medical condition, advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Psoriasis patients pay a hefty cost. And it's not just because their medications are so expensive or the inevitable battles in getting insurance companies to cover treatments. The price tag also includes the emotional cost in trying to convince others that psoriasis isn't contagious, that it cannot be spread by person-to-person contact. Dermatologist Dr. Mona Gohara says unlike a lot of other diseases, psoriasis is on full display at all times.
People see it. People see if you have psoriasis. They can't see if you've had a heart attack or if you had whatever's happening on the inside, a kidney stone. They can see if you have psoriasis or bad acne or eczema. It becomes part of who you are.
That is, of course, unless a patient takes conscious steps to cover it up. Many folks with psoriasis expend lots of time and energy doing just that. To avoid the stares in public, to prevent the shame and embarrassment of having to explain why their skin looks the way it does.
Even trying to go to the grocery store and to be able to pay for the stuff you get, and the cashiers are trying to just pick the money out of your hand without really touching your hand.
That's 51-year-old Vicki Wilkerson, who's lived with her psoriasis for 18 years.
People walk way around or even on a different aisle if they see my skin when it was so bad with the psoriasis. I've definitely experienced the stigma that comes along with it because people do not understand what the psoriasis is about.
Another psoriasis patient, Diane Talbert from Maryland, is 63, but she's felt the psoriasis stigma from early childhood, including on her first day of school when she was just 5 years old.
They told me I couldn't come in because I was covered from head to toe in psoriasis, and they thought I was contagious. So I knew from that moment that I was different. I was quarantined for 3 months. No one had ever seen anyone with severe psoriasis.
John Latella, a 79-year-old retiree from Connecticut, has had his own uphill battles against the stigma of psoriasis.
It made me feel anxious, made me feel less than other people. Felt like a leper. I should be going around with a bell, ringing, unclean, unclean. Because in the early times, people who had psoriasis were lumped in with lepers because they didn't know the difference. When we took the kids to the public pool in town, the lifeguard came over and said, "You got to get out of the pool because that stuff is going to spread all over everybody else." I said, "No, it's not contagious."
John told the lifeguard that he believed he was protected by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. But that didn't seem to matter to the lifeguard.
"I don't care what the ADA said. Get out of the pool." So I got thrown out of the pool. I went to the town manager after they said, "This was the most disgusting thing that ever has happened to me. I hope it never happens to another person. You better educate your lifeguards, because if you don't, I'll bring a lawsuit against you." But I never went back to a public pool. I installed pools in my own yard, stayed in my own yard. I just didn't want to be in front of people. I didn't want to have my family suffer that embarrassment.
John Latella's experiences are borne out by the results of a recent study. Dermatologist Dr. Mark Lebwall says it was an experiment conducted by a Canadian colleague.
He had first-year medical students paint tattoos on their elbows when they first started, and it was during short sleeve weather.
These were tattoos depicting areas of psoriasis on the student's skin.
And before they started the study, thought that psoriasis was a trivial disease. And then they walked around with those tattoos for just a few days. And the impact on the way other people treated them was so striking that to them it suddenly became a serious disease.
Catherine O'Leary is a clinical psychologist in the UK who also lives with psoriasis. She describes the impact of having psoriasis in terms of different layers.
So like on the top layer, there's having to deal with the physical symptoms. So itching, soreness, flaking skin, having to put on your treatments, those sort of physical things, which can be quite wearing, quite tiring, might affect your sleep, generally affect your well-being if you're not feeling great. And then the next layer is coping with other people's reactions. So, whether that's perceived or whether that's real, trying to hide it, trying to answer questions about your psoriasis, trying to manage it at work and that kind of thing. And then the other layer is the coping strategies. Some people might isolate themselves from people, so perhaps not go out, not socialize in order to cope with it. And then that kind of thing can lead to loneliness, to low mood, to frustration. People might not do things that make them feel happy. So not go to the beach, not go swimming, feel like they're missing out. And then that can lead on then to low mood, to anxiety. And of course, once you feel low, you lose interest in things and you stop doing the things that make you happy, and it all becomes a little bit of a vicious cycle.
Catherine says there are strategies that people can use to counteract the stigma and minimize negative reactions from others who may not know all of the facts.
Something that I would advise people to do is to kind of rehearse a little answer that you would give people, so that if you're out and about and a stranger says, "Oh, what's that on your leg?" you don't suddenly go into a panic mode and feel stressed and distressed by that. So I would just say to people, it's psoriasis, it's not contagious, it's an autoimmune disorder. So I give a little bit of an explanation. I might say something like, I have treatment for it, so I'm being looked after. So it's kind of a little bit of reassurance for people. And then I try to take control of the conversation. So if I've had enough of talking about psoriasis and the attention being on my skin, I might change the subject.
Another dermatologist, Dr. Joel Gelfand, says self-isolation is typical of people living with psoriasis. And he says it's crucial to have some type of outlet for the frustration the disease can bring.
Human interactions that we all take for granted can be really burdensome and traumatizing for people with psoriasis. Many people with psoriasis often feel alone with their disease, like they have no one to really talk to about it. And that could be very isolating as well. And so I really encourage my patients to make sure they're speaking to their close friends or romantic partners or what have you about the disease and what it entails, because no one should have to live without being understood and getting the empathy they deserve for a condition they're trying to battle.
Outwardly visible conditions like psoriasis can appear off-putting or even repulsive. And people like Vicki Wilkerson face the double burden of battling the disease while fighting the stigma.
People don't know. They just take these myths and run with them. And more knowledge is needed for people to understand about psoriasis. It really is.
In the next episode of Getting Clear on Psoriasis, we see how lives can be improved, both physically and emotionally, by finding the right psoriasis treatment.
It was just wonderful. It was like seeing the sunshine right after a heavy rainstorm. It's kind of hard to describe, but it just was an overjoyful feeling of, okay, I finally found something that's going to work for me.
That's coming up on Getting Clear on Psoriasis. If you like what you've heard, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and write a positive review. It'll help spread the word to more people who might be in need of support. And if you know of someone living with psoriasis, be sure to tell them about this podcast. As always, we welcome your feedback. So send us an email to psoriasis@ghlf.org. Until next time, I'm David Brandt. Thanks so much for listening. This podcast is made possible with support from Walgreens and Alliance RX Walgreens Prime, sponsors of the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.